and President and Group CEO, Managing Director of Mahindra Group, and Surjit Bhalla, the former ED to the IMF. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. Rathin, first takeaway from the economic survey and the messages it's sending out.
Well, there's nothing wrong with the messages. I think everyone would agree that the growth forecast is reasonable, that the chief economic advisor, this particular one, is an honest man. And he has been honest about the maximum possibilities implied in the next year. Everyone knows, following the Trump election, that the external front is going to be likely rocky and India will have to navigate it carefully. Everyone knows that agriculture has far too high an increasing share in GDP, and manufacturing has a lower share in GDP than we would like. It's the lowest in my lifetime. So I think in terms of his message of government getting out of the way, as a truism, I have no disagreement. The ED should get out of the way, and no doubt Surjit Bhalla's deep state should get out of the way. So I think it's quite an unexceptional economic survey. There isn't much economics in it, frankly, but that's okay. That's okay. This is not an economics-oriented government. And therefore, the political and economy messages, I think, are both clear and honest and modest. And the sort of overall aphorisms that are contained in the survey about what's happening in the world and what's happening in India are not easy to disagree with, very difficult to disagree with. So it's a good survey. And what I like about this survey is it's not this last 10 years, at least since 2017, we had these sort of flash bang economic surveys which pretend to have a theme and a focus and that sort of thing. This is what an economic survey traditionally was. It's very good geography. It's very astute. It provides a 360-degree view of the Indian economy and the rest of the world. I think that's a very good thing. I like this survey.
Yes, the survey highlighting, of course, what has happened across each of those sectors, from manufacturing to infrastructure to the PLI schemes, etc. Let me bring Anish Shah into the conversation as well. Anish, as I was pointing out, the message to the private sector is you are swimming in excess profits, in the words of the economic advisor. Those are not my words. And it is time now for the private sector to do more on job creation, Anish. In light of what the survey is suggesting, what's the expectation that you go into for the budget?
So, Shereen, good afternoon. I will start with a direct response from a private sector standpoint. The Mahindra Group has tripled capacity in auto for the last 3 years and has added 60% more capacity for tractors and is investing significantly in multiple areas. So we see a lot of optimism in India. We see the fundamentals very strong for growth in India. And the survey is essentially taking that forward. In fact, there's a lot of optimism. We see PMI up for literally 14 quarters in a row. And there are a number of other indicators that are positive as well. Yes, growth is at 6.3 to 6.8%, a little lower than what we'd like. But we will continue to see some blips along the road. But overall, the India story is a very strong one. Specifics in the survey that we think are very positive are first around farm and the fact that the agri-produce will likely be better. Second, the focus on productivity. That's a critical thing from an India Inc. standpoint. And third, specifically what you have on the screen up there around deregulation, but more importantly, reducing the cost of manufacturing. That is going to make India the manufacturing hub. We have a number of ingredients in place to be able to make that happen. And with greater focus and emphasis on ease of doing business and on deregulation, that will help us reduce cost along with other measures that need to be taken and some aspect of demand stimulation. So I think these are all the factors that really put us on the right path, and we feel good about where we are.
Well, you're going into the budget feeling good about where you are. So let me ask you about what the hope now is as we count down to the budget 24 hours away. In light of what the survey is saying, what's the expectation on capex? Of course, it has been a record number that we've seen over the last few years. Do you anticipate a significant increase, or do you believe that it's likely to be around the similar number that we saw last time around? And demand stimulation, what's the expectation outside of capex on demand stimulation, Anish?
So first, we would say stay the course on capex. That's been a plus in the budgets over the last few years, which is a focus on the multiplier effect that capex brings in and the positivity from an economy standpoint on that front. The second is there is clearly a need for some demand stimulation because we see weakness in the middle and the lower segments, and that's something that needs to be addressed in a pinpoint manner for them. One potential way to do it that also links in with simplicity is to simplify the tax code and potentially have a stimulus again for the lower and the mid segments of society that will hopefully get us stronger demand. And these are the main things that we would look at. Yes, there may be a few others, but these are the primary ones.
Yes, I think the focus on capex, the hope is that that will continue, and the assumption is that that will in fact continue. What can the government do in terms of providing tax relief is the big question. Will this be the budget that finally addresses the middle class by way of tax relief? The hope is building on that front. Whether we'll see a slab rejig is the big question. But let me welcome Surjit Bhalla to the conversation as well. Surjit Bhalla, many thanks for joining us. Your big read from the economic survey, but more importantly, what you believe it could perhaps signal the budget will take forward.
The big read from the economic survey is that we've got a very strong inclusive growth. We don't have high growth. That is very clear from the survey, expecting only about 6% or so, 6.3% next year or this year. But, you know, the inclusive growth numbers are very, very impressive. Whether you look at what has happened to consumption growth across the sectors, and they cite the survey, the latest 23-24 survey. So agricultural growth is very, very strong. And actually, this is a big story that I think is underemphasized. We used to have agricultural growth for the last 55, 60 years at somewhere around 3%. And now we have graduated upwards to about 5% agricultural growth. So that's the good news in the economic survey that I see. There are some not necessarily good news, but something I don't understand. And Shereen, you pointed this out about expecting job growth to come from that. What is it? Give me the exact quote that the government has
enlightened.
Something.
No, it's in the enlightened self-interest of the private sector.
You know, I think we should discuss that a bit more. Look, I've just stated that I think there's a lot of inclusive growth, and I think there are very robust numbers to suggest that. But I haven't, you know, it's got to be the very definition of socialism, right? That it is in your enlightened self-interest to give a higher wage. I just do not understand that statement. Second, I think the government, or the economic survey rather, is not reading the data. They present data on very high growth in employment, which I think is very positive, part of inclusive growth. But, you know, they want to circumvent also the conclusion that real wages have not risen to a very strong extent. There has been a very solid growth in the real wages of the casual workers. But the salaried workers, which are basically the middle class, there has been almost zero real growth in real wages. So this is the problem. And, you know, why don't they connect the two? If I were to try and make some sense out of this, you've got a big expansion in supply. That supply is being accommodated by the market, but it is being accommodated, as Econ 101 would suggest, by not much rise in real wages. That's the story. So enlightened self-interest won't do anything, and I don't expect anybody to really work in the enlightened self-interest. Everybody is working towards maximizing, you know, it's age-old stuff, maximizing their utility, maximizing their profits, etc. Let that be. That is the state of the world. That is the state of the economy. So let's not bring in these other weird notions of enlightened self-interest.
Very quickly, Surjit, Bhalla, do you expect tax cuts for the middle class tomorrow, to the point that Anish was making in terms of stimulating demand?
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely necessary, given the results that I have just talked about, and I have written about it, will be writing about it, that I think it's an absolute necessity for them to have significant tax cuts across the board. Real wages have not increased for the salaried middle class. And, both for political reasons, and, it's good politics to have, if you will, satisfy also accede to the interests of the middle class. Middle class, it used to be the case that most of India was poor. So therefore we do policies in the name of the poor. I think now most of the population is middle class, and therefore our policies should be in the name of the middle class. One such policy, and a very important one, is to boost up their real disposable income. A growth in real disposable income is needed, and that can only be done by having a significant tax cut.
Rathin, again, and I'm trying to link what the survey is sending out by way of messages saying, look, it's going to be a difficult external environment. FDI is going to be challenging given the move towards greater protectionism. In this context, do you believe that there's likely to be any preemptive move that we could take to try and encourage more FDI to come in, but also more domestic private investment to pick up?
Well, I don't know about domestic private investment because, your interlocutor from the private sector is saying both things at the same time. He's saying that, the private investment has doubled and tripled, at least for the Mahindra group. That is so of the whole economy, then why bother? And he's also saying, of course, that demand is somewhat muted in the lower areas. So I don't think that private investment will come in, and here I agree with Surjit, in their visualized self-interest. Enlightened self-interest is something I was not taught in school, much like implicit growth. But visualized self-interest is that the private sector can see a pathway where if they increase investment, they're going to make more money. Then they will invest. At the moment, they're not seeing that. And they're not seeing that for a variety of reasons. But I don't think, and one of the reasons obviously is that the growth engine of the top 10 to 15% of the population has maxed out, what people are pleased to call the middle class. It's a bit absurd because don't forget, people start paying personal income tax in this country at 3.5 times the per capita income. In any other G20 country, it starts at, even Indonesia, the second poorest, slightly above the per capita income. So if you're earning 3.5 times the per capita income and only then you begin to pay tax, then I'd submit the solution is that people should earn a little more at lower levels of per capita income, which requires a higher per capita income and perhaps a more egalitarian distribution of income. And that would give you the demand boost that people are looking for. But, you can't do that in one economic survey. That's a structural issue. When it comes to navigating the globe, I think India has been fairly adept at it. I'm a bit puzzled at recent events with the exchange rate, but maybe that's a blip. But otherwise, India has maintained a fairly non-volatile exchange rate that has been very realistic in terms of, the fact that we do run a current account deficit. Therefore, it must depreciate, but the depreciation has both been orderly and well calibrated through the taper tantrum. So macroeconomic management has been okay. The fiscal deficit has been going down fairly steadily post-COVID. And as for the rest, the state of the Indian economy is not one that is going to be, sort of adversely affected by most headwinds, except perhaps if we get into a battle on tariff. But that's not been spoken of in the economic survey. But I do trust that this administration will handle the Trump administration skillfully and avoid that pitfall or danger. Because one of the few countries in the world with whom we do run a balance of payments surplus is the United States. Very unfortunate if that changed. Our attempts to sort of lower our trade deficit with China have obviously not succeeded for the very good reason, again, that China is one of the cheapest manufacturers in the world. So navigating headwinds and being honest that there are external headwinds is good. I would have liked to see a little more honesty about the structural problems the Indian economy is facing, but then one can't expect that to come in an economic survey. So I think he's gone as far as he can with his messages that the private sector is not doing enough, and we need to investigate why, and the private sector also needs to be a little more honest and a little less public relations about what exactly ails them from investing more in the economy, and also not celebrate, and he has not done this, the growth in agriculture and the decline in manufacturing, suddenly overnight as if we have found some new miracle way to attain Viksit Bharat or whatever it is called. 6% growth is 6% growth. It is highly unsatisfactory. It's the growth I see. If there is, like Surjit's implicit growth and Surjit's deep state, something I do not see, then that is speculative, and it's quite right that the economic survey did not speculate on it.
Yeah, Anish, I know you have a board meeting, so I'm going to let you go with a final comment. That really has to do with tying in everything that we've spoken about. But specifically from a global standpoint, the threat of tariffs, we don't know what the Trump administration is going to do. We will perhaps find out on the day of the budget itself. But, any preemptive action that you anticipate on that front? There is, of course, a customs duty overhaul that's also expected.
Shereen, we've seen uncertainty in a very significant way over the last few years. And the one positive we see with the Trump administration is that they're very focused on the economy and they're very focused on growth. And that, in my view, augurs well for India. So at this point, no preemptive actions required on that front, and we will deal with the uncertainty as it comes with, as we have so far.
Yes, and we will, of course, have to wait to see what action the Trump administration does take. Anish, many thanks for joining us. Appreciate you taking time out of a board meeting to join us here on CNBC-TV18. But Surjit, I want to come back to you. And again, you know, this is a theme that is, in a way, making its way back into the survey. It was there in different ways last time around as well. The survey is saying one critical risk to guard against is the dominance of the financial markets in shaping policy and macroeconomic outcomes, a phenomena known as financialization. Last time around as well, this was a cautionary message of the survey, but more in the context of the move towards the markets and F&O and so on and so forth. What do you take away from this?
Well, I'd rather, first comment on deregulation, which is the dominant part, as you're saying, in the economic survey, that we need deregulation. Absolutely. I don't think that's has the good housekeeping seal of everybody's, that we need deregulation. But then I was a little bit worried when you look at FDI, and FDI has really declined. They really don't have a version of understanding of what is causing FDI to go down. And that's contradictory to their emphasis on deregulation. FDI is heavily deregulated, heavily regulated, and through the bilateral investment treaties that we have now engineered over the last 7-8 years, a new form of treaty of FDI, where when the FDI comes in, it will only be arbitrated by an Indian judge, rather than whenever they have a disagreement, which happens often, I guess. But previously, and around the world, the policy is that, look, when there's disagreement between the foreign investor and the domestic investor, this is not portfolio, this is FDI, then you go to a third country judge. The new policy starting in 2015, and which is really beginning to bite now because all the old bilateral investment treaties are pretty much gone, is that when there's a disagreement, you will go to an Indian judge. And that is why the foreigners, the investors, foreign investors in India have voted with their feet. They are not bringing in any more FDI, which means technology is not there, and which really is hurting. So this is a huge regulation that the government has brought in, unlike any other country I know. Now, it makes sense if the U.S. were to say that, look, we'll go to the U.S. courts. It makes sense if a lot of the European courts say that, look, we will go to our courts, because there is universal trust in their courts. There is no universal trust in most courts of most developing countries. So therefore, to bring in that we will be, arbitrated by an Indian judge, I think, and it's just a one stroke of the pen that they have to do, and boom, we will get deregulation, we will get foreign investment, we will get growth, and we don't have to appeal to enlightened self-interest to get growth going.
Surjit, Bhalla, Rathin, Roy, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow bright and early on Budget Day as we pore over the numbers and see what direction the government finally decides to take.